Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever felt that thrill of a perfectly struck golf shot,
Oh, yeah.
followed immediately by something that, well, feel like you've never held a club before,
Yeah.
you're definitely in the right place today.
Yeah, that's the classic golfer experience, isn't it? That up and down.
Totally. So today, we're digging into that maddening inconsistency that plagues so many of us out on the course.
Exactly. And, we often chase the perfect grip, maybe the perfect stance, and yeah, those are important, no doubt.
Sure.
But we're going to explore something maybe a bit deeper, an often overlooked aspect of the swing, how your body actually moves. Specifically, we're going to talk about sway.
Sway. Okay.
Yeah.
That side-to-side movement, right? Pelvis and chest during the swing.
That's the one.
Sounds simple enough, but
Mhm.
I guess it turns out that understanding and crucially measuring this lateral motion can be a real eye-opener
Yeah.
for figuring out what's going wrong.
Absolutely. It's huge. And that's really where technology like Sportsbox AI 3D comes into play.
Right, the 3D stuff.
Exactly. Sportsbox AI 3D uses, well, pretty sophisticated 3D motion capture. It lets us actually see and maybe more importantly, measure this sway with incredible accuracy.
So, hard data. We're moving beyond just feel and guesswork.
Precisely. Numbers, inches.
Okay, but hang on, sway isn't all bad, is it? I mean, you always hear about needing to load into your backswing for power.
Right.
That involves some sideways movement, surely.
You're absolutely right. It does. Sway is actually a key ingredient in generating power in the golf swing. You need some shift.
Okay.
However, like any powerful force, really, if it's not controlled, if it's excessive or ill-timed, it can lead to a lot of inconsistency.
Gotcha.
And Sportsbox AI 3D gives us two critical measurements for looking at this. First is pelvis sway. That's how much your hips shift laterally, side to side, measured in inches from your setup position, which we call 0 inches.
The 0 inches at address. Makes sense.
And the second one is called sway gap. Now, this is the horizontal distance between your chest and your pelvis.
Chest and pelvis separation, horizontally.
Yeah. So a negative sway gap means your chest is like behind your pelvis relative to the target, which can actually be good at certain points. A positive value means your chest is ahead, and that often points to a problem.
Okay. Negative good sometimes, positive usually bad. Pelvis sway and sway gap. Got it. So with these measurements, what kind of specific swing issues can we start to, uncover? What's our mission for this deep dive?
Well, our mission today is to explore five key swing faults that become really clear when you look at this pelvis sway and sway gap data.
5 big ones.
Yeah, and understanding these faults, specifically through the lens of how your body is moving laterally, I think it can be a real game changer for improving consistency.
All right, let's dive in then. What's the first major swing fault that this sway data helps us understand?
Okay, so the first one is a lack of recentering in the backswing.
Recentering.
Yeah, think about the top players, right? As they swing back, their pelvis, it actually moves back towards the center, towards that 0-inch mark, before they even reach the top of their backswing. It's a little shift back.
Okay, they don't just keep drifting away from the target.
Exactly. Now, if your pelvis sway number at P3, and P3 is just, standard golf lingo for when your lead arm is parallel to the ground, about halfway back.
Got it.
If that number is significantly negative, let's say it's like negative 2.5 inches or even more, that suggests you're not recentering effectively. You've shifted away, but you haven't started shifting back yet.
Okay, so my hips slide too far away from the target early on, and we just stay there. What's the problem with that? What's the ripple effect?
Well, the big issue with not recentering is that it often leads to a steep downswing. The club comes down too vertically. Yeah. It can also cause early extension, where you thrust your hips toward the ball too soon on the way down. And ultimately, it just results in poor contact. By not recentering, you're really limiting your ability to rotate with power and efficiency. The whole sequence gets out of sync. Think of it like winding up a spring properly. That slight move back towards the center lets you unleash more rotational power on the way down.
Okay, yeah, I can picture that.
Yeah.
So if that's not recentering properly, the opposite problem would be swaying too much, right?
That leads us right into the second fault, exactly. Well, like we said, some lateral motion to your trail side, your back foot side, in the backswing is normal, even good for loading power. Excessive sway becomes a real hindrance.
And how do we define excessive in the data?
We generally see problems when that pelvis sway goes beyond that same negative 2.5-inch mark we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So moving more than 2.5 inches away from the target with your hips.
Okay, so I'm really shifting my weight way, way over onto my back foot. What are the typical consequences of doing that too much?
Well, when you sway too much to the trail side, it just becomes very difficult to shift your weight back effectively, dynamically into a strong impact position.
Right.
Your ability to control the low point of your swing suffers, meaning you'll struggle to consistently hit the ground in the right spot relative to the ball. And this often leads straight to inconsistent contact, those frustrating fat shots where you hit the ground first, thin shots or tops where you catch the ball too high,
Yeah.
and just generally weak strikes that rob you of distance and accuracy.
Oof. That definitely rings a bell for me sometimes. Okay, so we've covered the pelvis moving too much or not enough at the right time. What about when the chest and pelvis aren't working together correctly? That leads us to fault number 3, right?
Yes, exactly. The third major issue we see is the infamous reverse pivot.
Ah, the reverse pivot. Heard of that one.
Yeah. So this happens when your chest, your upper body, actually moves towards the target during the backswing while your pelvis stays back or maybe doesn't move enough.
Okay.
And you can spot this clearly in the sway gap data. Remember that.
Yeah, chest versus pelvis.
If that sway gap value is positive at the top of the backswing, it means your chest is horizontally ahead of your pelvis. That's your classic reverse pivot indicator.
I can picture that. It almost looks like someone is leaning towards the target at the pop, doesn't it? What's the impact on the actual shot?
Well, with a reverse pivot, your upper body tends to lead the downswing too much too early. It really messes up the proper sequencing.
Right. Kills the power coil.
Totally. You often end up hitting down too steeply on the ball or maybe catching it with more of a glancing blow. Either way, you lose both power and control. Reverse pivots are honestly pretty common among amateur golfers, and they're often linked to those wild directional inconsistencies and, early extension again.
It always comes back to early extension.
It often does. Imagine trying to throw a ball while leaning forward. You lose so much leverage and accuracy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a similar kind of principle in the golf swing with a reverse pivot.
Okay, so those are issues mostly in the backswing and the transition at the top. What about what happens as we're actually hitting the ball? You mentioned hanging back is another common fault.
That's right. Fault number 4, hanging back at impact. This basically means you're not shifting your weight and pressure effectively onto your lead side as you strike the ball.
Okay, and how does the data show that?
When we see a pelvis sway value at impact that's under, say, 2.5 inches towards the target, so less than 2.5 inches of hip shift forward, that often signals this problem. Your hips just haven't gotten forward enough.
So effectively, my weight is still staying on my back foot through the hit. What does that usually look like in the swing and, the shot result?
The typical result visually is often a casting motion.
Throwing the club from the top.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of that powerful stored-up release from the inside, you're essentially throwing the club head at the ball from way back. This is often accompanied by, guess what?
Let me guess. Early extension.
You got it. And also a tendency to kind of scoop at the ball, trying to lift it into the air instead of compressing it down.
Ah, the Scooby shot. Know it well.
Yeah. The outcome is usually a significant loss of distance and pretty poor directional control. You can often spot these players visually. They almost look like they're trying to help the ball up into the air rather than hitting down and through it.
Right. I've definitely seen that look. Okay, so that's hanging back. Now, our final fault, number 5, connects this sway data to the actual path of the club. You mentioned steep swings and negative, like out to in club paths. How does our lateral body movement tie into that?
Well, we can often identify tendencies towards steep swings and those negative or out-to-in paths by looking again at the sway gap, but this time at impact.
Okay, the chest-pelvis separation at the moment of truth.
Exactly. If that sway gap value is at 0 inches, meaning the chest and pelvis are horizontally level, or even positive, which means the chest is actually ahead of the pelvis at impact.
Wow, okay.
That frequently leads to a steep attack angle. You're hitting down on it too much, especially noticeable and problematic with the driver.
So instead of the club shallowing out nicely on the downswing, swinging more from the inside, the tendency is to come down too vertically, maybe even over the top.
Precisely. Now, what's really interesting is to compare this to what we see with top professional golfers.
What do they do differently?
They tend to actually increase the negative sway gap throughout their downswing, so their upper body stays further behind their lower body as they approach and hit the ball.
Interesting. So being more behind with the upper body relative to the hips at impact is actually a good thing for power and path.
Yes, generally, very much so. That increased negative sway gap in elite players facilitates a more efficient, shallower swing path. It
Mm.
allows for better energy transfer into the ball, proper sequencing, and ultimately leads to more consistent and powerful shots.
Wow, it's fascinating how these seemingly small lateral body movements, the sway, has such a huge impact on how the club is actually delivered to the ball.
It really does.
And the really powerful thing here, like you said, is that all of these patterns, these 5 faults we've just walked through, are now genuinely measurable with something like Sportsbox AI 3D.
Mhm.
It's not just relying on a coach's trained eye anymore, is it?
Not at all. It's objective data, almost like giving you x-ray vision into your own swing mechanics.
Yeah.
You can literally upload your own swing into the Sportsbox AI 3D app and then examine your pelvis sway and your sway gap at those key checkpoints we mentioned, P3, top of the backswing, impact.
Hmm.
You can actually see the movement patterns, the numbers that you might have been completely unaware of before. It gives you that objective look at what your body is truly doing, not just what you feel it's doing.
That's huge. So if someone listening is thinking, wow, one or two of those faults definitely sounds familiar, or maybe they're just curious, what's the next step for them? How can they find out more about this technology or get analyzed?
Well, a lot of these specific insights and this framework come from Henrik Jentsch. He's the director of Golf Academy 360 Degrees, which is powered by Sportsbox AI 3D. He's really a pioneer in advanced golf biomechanics coaching over in Europe and has been instrumental in applying this Sportsbox technology to help golfers actually improve based on this kind of data.
Right.
So if you're interested in getting more information, maybe exploring training options with this data, or even looking into purchasing the Sportsbox AI 3D app and the studio setup for yourself or your facility, you can reach out to Henrik Jentsch directly. That's at Golf Academy 360 Degrees, powered by Sportsbox AI.
Excellent. So wrapping this up then, the key takeaway here really seems to be that understanding how your body moves laterally during the golf swing, this whole concept of sway, it's just fundamental,
Yeah.
absolutely fundamental to achieving a consistent and powerful golf shot.
Couldn't agree more.
It's not just about your hands or your arms, important as they are.
Yeah.
It's really about the engine, right? The core body movement that drives the whole swing.
That's it, exactly. So maybe think about how these 5 common faults we've discussed, think about how they might be showing up in your own game. Do any of those descriptions, the movement patterns, the resulting mishits, do any of those sound particularly familiar to you?
Yeah, I know a couple definitely hit home for me.
Yeah.
It really makes you reconsider what's actually happening in your swing versus maybe what you feel is happening. This completely clarifies some things.
Yeah, the feel versus real problem. And this kind of raises a really important final thought, maybe a provocative question for you, the listener. Now that you have, hopefully, a deeper understanding of what to look for in your body's lateral movement, how might being able to actually visualize your own sway data, see those numbers, how might that transform the way you practice and ultimately just deepen your understanding of your own unique golf swing? It's a whole new dimension of analysis to consider, isn't it?